In this episode, we're going to talk about a book that I've been writing and my book writing process, and we're going to talk about the cycle of the hero's journey and finding your own path and how to find purpose in the work that you do and how to find work that you find more enjoyable, particularly if you're stuck in something that you're doing that you want to do something else for. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll get into the episode now. What's up, everybody? I watched Dune last night. It's so me and came Mubarak came to Utah a couple weeks ago, and we were
Yeah.
talking about religion. I grew up Mormon. You grew up in Islam, and so we were talking
Yeah.
about. I've been I've been going on this kind of weird path on mythology and kind of purpose of life stuff, and so we were talking about jinns, right? So what's a jinn in Islam, Mubarak?
So it's basically like the concept of like before God created man, he had jinns walking the earth. So it's like they're made of fire, they're invisible to the naked eye, but they're existing beings with us. So it's almost like there's some backstory and some mythology to it and religion backing, but it's like, Satan was created from a jinn. Satan is the king jinn almost because he was the normal kind of being, right? And then God decided to create humans, and Satan became Satan because of his and ego and pride that he didn't want to bow down or prostrate to Adam, basically because he was like, he's made of dirt, I'm made of fire, I'm the superior being. And so then that's how that guy, who was a number one jinn basically prior to Adam being created, became Satan basically, and we call him
The
Shaitan.
OG, the
So
OG jinn.
yeah, yeah.
He's the OG Jin. And so in Dune, which I was watching last night, they talk about Jins as like
Oh, really?
spirits.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the second one. I watched the first one a bit ago. Interesting. I gotta watch that.
I mean, Dune is hella long and we went at
Yeah.
like 8 o'clock. So I was hella tired, but they were talking about Jins, which I thought was, funny. And so when you were here, we were doing some business stuff, and I've been recently. So I've been in the process of writing a book for a year, and the first version of the book that I started writing was about how to sell a company. Right, I just kind of it had been within a year that I had sold my company. I felt like there wasn't a lot of great info in terms of how to get a company sold, whether you want to sell it for yourself or something else. So I started writing about basically the tactical experience of selling your business. I got like 60 pages in, and I
Did
was
you
just
take a
totally,
piece of that and make it into like a ebook? Like
can I?
no, no, no. I'm saying did you? Like I remember when I first came across you before we even kind of hopped on the call, a first call and like talked us. I came across, I think it was like RaleighWilliams.net or something, and you
Oh
had a
yeah.
really good. I thought it was good. I mean, I thought it was a very good, well written out thing, but I think it's not there anymore.
What was it? Was it on Exit or on the 10 Commandments to Starting a Side Hustle?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That one.
So
Yeah.
10 Commandments. So the first thing I ever wrote when I first got into internet marketing, whatever, was the 10 Commandments to starting a side hustle, which I wrote, and I gave myself like 3 hours to write it, and I just wrote it, and I then I kind of like edited it a little bit, and for a year I would sell it for like $20 just because I wanted to see if there was any interest there, and then a
Because
couple
that
years
was like
later.
your business you sold was not an internet business. It was a brick and mortar, right?
Yeah.
So
So
this
it
was
was in
your
a
foray into
and
digital.
and as I was running that business, I thought that I wanted to help lawyers learn how to not be lawyers. I wanted to give people a path to make money on their own from from high school to college. Like in college, I always had jobs helping people get into college and law school. I'd help kids work on their law school
What
applications
do you
to
mean? You
like.
work like on the side, or like you mean you work like in the enrollment office or admissions office or something?
I did both. I would work I worked in the enrollment office at the University of Chicago, helping the undergrad kids work on their law school applications, and then at BYU, I would work on the side, like helping people get their. For whatever reason, I've always just been interested in helping people get the job or like do the thing that they want to do the most, whether that was getting into a certain school or a different type of work. So as I became entrepreneurial, I wanted to kind of help people learn their own entrepreneurial path, kind of find the tools that made it less intimidating. So that's why I wrote the 10 Commandments of Starting a Side Hustle back in the day.
I see.
And then when I looked at it years and years later, I was like, yo, this is trash. I'm not selling this anymore. I freaking
I
hate
mean, it's
it.
probably because you evolved, right? But I mean, to the average person, I thought it was great. I mean, like it wasn't like, I think what you're good at is not being corny, not being like, or
Yeah.
not, or maybe like, here's the thing. I've been in the internet marketing game since like before Russell Brunson, like in
Yeah.
that time, like I saw him on Warrior forums talking about a stupid potato gun, and now obviously he's like the king. But so I saw that stuff back in the day, and so I have just seen a lot of copy and a lot of like, I've probably read over 10,000 ebooks, right? So like
Yeah.
it's usually the same, but I liked your external perspective because you didn't grow up in that world. I thought it was a nice kind of fresh perspective on it all.
Yeah, I tend to write like slightly with like almost like a negative slant, like almost critical and like kind of like throwing rocks at conventional thought.
Yeah.
Um, and so anyway, after I sold my company, I wanted to write about selling a company as a way to give. And again, for me, the thread there is so many entrepreneurs. I became an entrepreneur and I felt totally stuck in the business that I myself had created. I was sold that entrepreneurship is supposed to be this path to freedom and doing whatever you want to do. But the business that I built became its own um, sarcophagus for me. I built myself into the middle of the thing and I didn't know how to get out of it despite being an M&A lawyer before that. So I felt like if I got stuck in this with the skills that I had learned prior to coming into this, other people are probably stuck in this too, and sometimes they don't even know it themselves that they're stuck in it because they don't have like the framework to even see the prison that they themselves have created, and they get used to it, and they've been told for so long that entrepreneurship is freedom, but they can't go on vacation, they can't do what they want to do. So I started writing about that, and what I found was there were concepts that I really liked, like building incentive structures, building a growth plan, but then so much of the book kind of delved into the tactics. You can't really talk about selling a company without getting into the accounting of it and seller discretionary and all this stuff that I just found totally boring to write about. So I quit writing. Um, and then I started writing about. I thought maybe it would be more. I thought maybe it would be more interesting to talk to go back to the original people that I started writing for. Right, the
Yeah.
10 Commandments of Starting a Side Bet, of these people that are in W-2 jobs that they feel constrained or constricted by and frustrated, and are sold on the promise of entrepreneurship but don't really have an accessible path to get there, or they don't know what idea they should work on. And so I started writing again about what I was calling side bets, which is basically this idea of you don't have to go all in entrepreneurship. You don't have to burn the boats. You don't have to, because what ends up happening is the chasm that you see between where you are and where you want to go, it just feels like too wide of a chasm to really do anything. You feel like if I jump, I die. If I stay on the cliff, I at least live.
Yeah.
And so you stay on the cliff totally stuck in not finding fulfillment in the thing that you are doing, but not feeling like you feel like it's a bridge too far to get to the place that you want to go. So I wanted to.
Because it's just uncomfortable enough. It's just like, you know, the body is quick to forget almost. So it's like you hate your day job, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock comes around, you have dinner, watch TV. Okay, you kind of forget about, your pains and your troubles. And then boom, it starts again. And then when you really are frustrated on that Thursday or Friday, it's kind of like, it's almost a little bit nice because a lot of people that don't do goal setting or like aren't business people, like they don't really have big aspirations. So Friday afternoon becomes their like the sexy thing in their life, and so
Right.
it's something to aspire to, it's something to kill time to, and then boom, you get a whole mini vacation. Especially, people aren't working like that. That's kind of the conflict, or that's kind of the issue, is that the people not working on a side hustle actually end up having some more free time on the weekends. For any side
And they're
hustle.
content, right?
Yeah.
They just kind of feel into their own contentment of just like, this is what my life is going to be. And they can consign themselves to that fate. and they have enough tools to numb out what their ambition. If you get drunk enough, or if you watch enough, or if you go on vacation, they
You
keep,
just watch
it's
enough
just,
TV
just over.
episodes of The Office, and you forget everything.
It almost reminds me of like, I have a friend whose wife, they've had 8 kids together, and like, you go through the pregnancy process, and you're like, never again,
Yep,
and then you
yep.
have the kid, and you're like, that was horrible, but I think I can do it again.
Yeah,
I
you
think I can go
forget.
through
You
it one more
forget. By the
time.
time
You
you're
forget.
2, 3, 4, you forget all the sleepless nights and the hating, the dealing with it, and it resets. Yeah, no,
And you do
100%.
that basically on a daily basis with your job. And so side bets became this um, idea that I've been working on, and really where I think, and I'll tell you where I'm going with this now that I've kind of worked on it. And I've spent a lot of time after selling a company. When you sell a company at 30 something years old, or 50 something years old, or if you sell it that's not on the day that you die, you're left with this question of, what do I do now with my life? Which is really the same question that somebody is frustrated at their job at, right? You're asking the same question of, what should I do with my life? How do I find fulfillment? You're just asking it at a slightly different stage, and
And the time
usually
frame,
have.
right? When you think about that at your job, it's because you just walked out of a meeting or you're talking about it with a friend at lunch, but then you got to get back to work. And jobs are so much kind of tedious, little kind of grindy work for the most part. Law, accounting, bookkeeping, being a doctor, whatever, you're
Yeah.
seeing people every 15 minutes. You don't even have time to think about your aspirations. Whereas when you sell and do the exit, all you have is time. So it's even more crazy for people that have just sold because they don't have anything to do. They don't have, 8 or 10 hours a
And I
day.
think it also becomes more existential for them, because if you've sold for any amount of money for so long, you've had this idea that once I make enough money, I'll be fulfilled. You've looked at the top of this mountain for so long, and you say, once I get to the summit, then all of my feelings of anxiety and stress or rejection, or, all of those things are going to go away, and I'll finally be in a state of nirvana. I'll finally reach happily ever after. And then once you get there, once you summit it, you no longer have the delusional fantasy of getting there as the thing that keeps you going and the thing that keeps you excited, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so you get to the top, you see that the emperor has no clothes, and the thing that you've been pursuing for so long has been, especially if you only pursued it because you thought that a certain number in a bank account was going to be the thing that led to perpetual nirvana, you realize that you've made a fool's bet, and you are nowhere closer to the feeling that you thought that you would have when you got there.
yeah,
And versus the worker who, the dream of becoming a millionaire is totally enticing to them, and it allows them to deal with some of the drudgery that entrepreneurship requires at the beginning stages, middle stages, end stages, because it's like the people that are perpetually single that just convince themselves that once I get married, I'll be happy. And then
yeah.
anyone who is married knows that, like,
It's even
marriage is
harder than before.
the
Yeah,
beginning of the
yeah,
journey toward finding happiness with this person, not the end state that you think that it is when you're not on the other side of that chasm.
yeah.
And um and I think it applies in a bunch of stages, not just your purpose of what you do for work. I think the work one is interesting because we spend so much time working in our lives, 10, 14, from the
I
time
mean,
you
it has
graduate
to
college.
be. It probably is the number one thing that people spend time on in their life, right?
Yeah, I think it ends up being
Like,
the
definitely,
thing that,
people work more than they sleep for the most part. I would even imagine. So if you were to have a
yeah.
pie chart of everything you do in life, I would say work is probably number one.
And I think for whatever reason, at least for me, I feel like I never viewed work. I viewed work as a means to make as a means to make money, and as a means for productivity, and kind of like a duty filled thing that I needed to do with my time. And I never viewed work from maybe a more spiritual lens, or kind of at a higher plane of what you do for work, or how you do the work says something about you and should be able to unlock something within you, if you can find it. And to the extent that you haven't found it, that's an invitation to keep searching, not a problem that you're supposed to get super frustrated with. And so what I've been writing about, and here's the cycle that I want you to see if this rings true for you. I think we all start in a stage of relative comfort and stasis, kind of things are going along, and it's almost like I call it, it's almost like you're dreaming. You're just kind of unconscious in some way. Life's kind of on autopilot, right? And you're going. And then in everyone's life, they have an awakening, and an awakening can happen in one of two ways, one of two typical ways. Awakenings sometimes happen after a peak summiting experience, right? Where we kind of talk about you've reached the top of this, you've reached the end of this journey that you've sought, that you've kind of built up in your head for so long. And you get to the top and you realize, it's called the arrival fallacy. I've arrived and there's nothing here.
Yeah.
It's, Matt Damon, when he won the Oscars, and he's like, imagine living your whole life trying to pursue this and getting it at the end of your life and realizing what a massive waste of time you have spent trying to summit this thing, thinking that there's nirvana at the top and there's nothing there. So peak summit experiences, and then also valley experiences where typically valley experiences are, you get fired from the job that you thought that you really liked. You get divorced unexpectedly. A kid gets sick that you have to manage. A parent gets sick. You have this rapid and abrupt change in circumstance that, as you're experiencing it, it feels to you like a massive decline. It feels like a massive reduction in money, status, objectives, time, whatever. Right. And that also wakes you up because you're like, what the shit? Like for me, my first awakening was, I went to law school and I knew that I was going to be a lawyer. I was obsessed with being a lawyer.
Do you
And
like Suits? Sorry if that's a dumb question. I ask you all the time, but it just,
it,
yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, there's nothing that is more reflective of it than Suits. I mean, cause it's just, you have these hot secretaries that are talking to you all the time, and you're
And
like,
then they become the queen or whatever the shit she is.
yeah. And then one day you're helping
Okay,
a
but even the
criminal.
boring parts, right? Even the boring parts, right? Like the court cases or like the types of cases. Or no, is it
Yeah,
just
I mean, like one day I would be helping somebody on death row, and then the next day I would be like doing a merger for Walmart, and so like that's what I. No, it's nothing like Suits. It's absolutely nothing like Suits. The the clearest example of what practicing law is, and I gave this analogy to a friend who is a year behind me, is imagine that you're paid $180,000 a year to work at a library, and your job at the library is you go in and you pick a book off of the shelf, much like this one, and you open it up and you just retype the words. You take the book, open it, retype it, take as long as you need to do to retype it. And as soon as you're done with that book, you get a new book and you retype that book too. And you do that for the rest of your life until you say that you're sick of it. It's just, it's just massively mind numbing work that you do over and over and over again. I mean, it's highly bureaucratized, and it's just, some people love it. I would say people that are maybe more intellectual than I am love that type of work. But for me, it felt like massive drudgery, even though I was well paid.
And I would
Um,
caveat that because it's like old crappy books. It's not like, because if I was to had to have 10 million, 20 million in the bank, I would probably just want to read all day, So
yeah, no, you don't get to read. You don't get to
yeah,
read. You only
yeah,
can retype.
yeah, retype like just BS stuff. Yeah.
and um and so for me, I had a panic attack within the first couple of weeks of having this job
Like a
that
legitimate one or like just,
no, a real one, like a legit
oh,
one. Yeah. Like
nice.
I thought I was going to die. I thought I was having I hoped that I had a heart attack, because that's like a real thing. It's like, oh shit, something's actually wrong with me. A panic attack, at least at the time, I felt like a panic attack was like what happens to bitches. You know what I mean? It's like,
I was
you
gonna ask,
don't
did your partner wonder if you were a B or not?
like a panic attack is the worst thing because it feels like a heart attack, but it's nothing. It's just that you're messed up in the head.
Yeah.
That was my
What is
perception
it
at the
like?
time.
You like chest hurts, like
I was
Yeah.
at the gym. Yeah, I was at the gym and I thought I was having a heart attack. And so I called my wife and I was like, here are my symptoms. She looked it up on WebMD and she's like,
But
this is
like,
a
if you're
panic
having a
attack.
real heart attack, do you have time for all that, or do you like fall on the
I was
floor?
trying to I was trying to get Carly to take me to the hospital. I was
Okay.
calling her from the gym. I was at the gym at the office about to go in.
Oh,
I got
oh,
an email. I got an email that I saw on my Apple Watch from a partner that's like new client matter number S3,
yeah,
and it just tailspun me for whatever
yeah. I
reason.
just
And so
deleted
anyway,
it.
that was an awakening experience, which I think happens on summits and valleys. And then post awakening, after you have an awakening experience, and I think an awakening, what it is you realize that you've been asleep, that you've been on someone else's path, that you are trying to live your life for someone else, and there's some part of you that has forced you to wake up. You almost never choose to have the awakening. It's kind of forced on you from external or internal circumstances.
It's kind of like something that you wake up feeling every day, and it's like recurring. It's not just a one-time thing. It's like you felt the same thing for a week now, for a
Yeah.
month now.
And the awakening is where you come to the realization, right? For me, the realization when I had that panic attack was I can't be a lawyer. But outside of being a lawyer, I have no idea what I am. I've been saying that I want to be a lawyer for the past 6 years. I went to a very expensive school. I have a lot of money and time invested into this process. After the awakening, what happens is you have a descent. You have a descent into chaos. So you go down, not up. And people think an awakening is, this connective experience with God or spirit or whoever. And then you ascend and you start getting rich. And it's the exact opposite. When you have an awakening, chaos is what comes next because you start recognizing the noise that is in your life that has kept you on what I would call the default path, just the path that was kind of picked for you to do. And you stay in the chaos until you have an encounter or an interaction with the daemon. And what the daemon is um, kind of like a jinn, like we talked about. It's a spirit guardian angel that knows what you're supposed to do with your life and will guide you to it. So I call this whole circle experience like the cycle of the call of hearing the hero's call to what you're supposed to do with your life.
Okay, so for anybody though who's not like super spiritual or religious, what does that actually mean? Like, how does the daemon, the guidance, right? Where does that come from some for the normal average person?
So I think it's helpful to think about what the daemon is trying to push you to do, and really what I think the daemon tries to push you to do is to create something new that is uniquely yours to create. I mean, so the idea of the daemon comes from the Greeks were the first that really talked about it. They believed in a bunch of different gods, and they believed that there was a part of their soul that could dance between this human world and the world of the gods, and that part of their soul knew the pattern that their life was supposed to take. And if they get off pattern, if they get off path for too long for their unique path, not the path that other people tell them to do, that the daemon will impel them toward that path once again. And really what that path is for everyone is it's a path of creating things. And I think a lot of times people think that to be a creator, you must be creative, and they don't think of themselves as artistic or whatever. So to put this kind of in a
Yeah.
context of how it happened, my first time through the cycle, which was I knew that I couldn't be a lawyer. That was very disorienting to me because that was kind of the path that I had picked. And I tried all these other things, and none of them really worked. And there was a bunch of dead ends. And then ultimately, when I came across the idea of an escape room, there was something in that idea even though I didn't have a passion for the escape room. I didn't love playing escape rooms. I didn't bring me any joy doing the thing, but building the thing and creating the thing. I remember that when I was like, I know I'm going to quit this job. I stayed up all night. I just couldn't sleep because I was excited, I was scared, I was nervous. But I knew that I had to do it because I knew I couldn't not do it anymore. The fear of staying on that cliff
Yeah.
on the one side of the
But
chasm as opposed to the jump.
you just glossed over something super important, which I want to make sure that doesn't get lost. Is you said that you tried a bunch of other things that didn't work, right? Before you came across the escape room.
Yeah.
Like, how long was that period, and what were you doing during that time? I think that's a big thing that gets lost, is that people think I leave my job and I found my new opportunity, and I make my millions, so like,
Yeah,
let's I think take a minute to talk about that period, because I think that is the most important period that, if done improperly, leads somebody to just go back to a job and
for
just
sure.
reset their cycle all over.
So from the period that I had my panic attack to the time that I put my 2 weeks notice in of like, yo, I'm doing this, I'm going for it. That was a 7 month period. I studied
Mhm.
for consulting interviews to go to take a job at McKinsey. I put an offer on a residential house to do a skilled nursing facility. I started a faceless Instagram account
And you
that
have no
never.
back
No,
consulting
this
thing,
is
but
me
not
just
the
like
not
this
the
is me
skills
just like
development.
I will
Okay.
do anything. I got my real estate license on a weekend because I thought maybe I could be a realtor. Um,
Yeah.
I bought a couple tax liens on from like old properties, right, that hadn't paid their taxes, and so I spent.
Where did these ideas come to you? Like, you just YouTubed it, or you had
This was
friends, or
like
like,
this was
why
just
a home care agency? Like,
this became, when you're asleep, your default answer is no, I'm not going to do it. I don't need to do it. I have no interest in doing it. Once you go through an awakening and when you're in the midst of the chaos, the chaos wants you to open to a yes. That's what it's trying to get you to do. Say yes, start saying yes. And at the starting phase of something, you can only start something with an affirmative answer of I will try it. I'm down to try. And so I was leaving my known world of what I knew how to do because I knew that my fulfillment wasn't in that world. And so I had to go the chaos is throwing you into a world of unknown and trying to have you reorient yourself to this unknown world and really find who you are. A lot of times, chaos has to take you far enough out of the context of your story that you've had for so long of what it is that you do, and basically says, like, what do you want to do now? And for me, the answer was I didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do because from the time that I was 19, I knew that I was going to be a lawyer until the moment that I didn't know anymore. Right. And so I tried all of those things, but all of those things I think led me to the escape room business. And the escape room business was when I saw it, there was something in me that knew that I had to do it. And basically the thought, what I told my wife was, if I don't do this, I will never be able to talk about, if I don't do this, a part of me is going to the part of me that fancies myself an entrepreneur or someone who's a savvy business guy or who's a risk taker, that part of me I will need to kill because I cannot pass this opportunity up and be delusional with myself enough to say that, oh, one day I'm going to do it, even though I passed up an opportunity where it seemed like enough stars aligned that I just needed to take the risk and do it.
yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. No, and I appreciate that, because that is also for me. Like, I also did, like, I probably created like 20 different businesses in my life
Yeah.
so far, and not, and 18 of them have failed.
Yeah.
One I sold for 6 figures, one I've gone to 8 million in revenue. But the rest, and some others, are kind of give me some good cash flow and stuff. But
I think there's
for the
an
most part, like,
I think there's an
yeah,
interesting, like, when I felt so trapped, and I actually don't know this is something that I'm trying to actively work out in what I'm writing because I don't actually know the through line yet, but I think it's interesting that when I felt so trapped in my profession, I built a business around escaping, and that business did well. Cancer, and before that, she went through a baby weight loss process. I think and just to finish that thought, we built a health company after she had declining health,
yeah,
despite it being not her fault at all, and that health company has done amazingly well. That there's something with the creative act that the daemon pushes you to do, and that creative act exorcism, as in, like, getting out this thing that is within you that needs to come out. Exorcism is in a bad sense, it's the demonic, but I think there's something that the creative thing that the daemon pushes you to create completes a part of you and taps into a part of you that has been suppressed or cannot find expression in the default path that you've chosen for yourself. And that creative act then leads to a new level of comfort and stasis which is the very beginning of the cycle again. and and you
Like
become
once
comfortable
you have been
with the new thing,
successful.
which then leads to an awakening, a descent into chaos, a reuniting with the daemonic, the creative act, and then a new level. And I think it's a constant up leveling of comfort and stasis, that period of stability, and this is all going great, and then an awakening, and then a descent, and all those
So
things.
I like your cycle, and I think a lot of it makes sense. But I think I see two major flaws that I'd like to talk to you about,
Yeah,
and see the where you started off with was the beginning of the cycle is like, okay, the stasis, and people are like kind of cruising and comfortable. I
yeah,
think that's like upper middle class, right? But I would say 50% of the American population is not at that part, and
sure,
is having trouble paying their bills, having to work 2 3 jobs just to kind of like they're working out of necessity, not because of like, they're living paycheck to paycheck, right? So
sure.
how does that go into your, the cycle? um yeah,
I think I think it goes in this way. What I call, I think stasis is a better word, but less understood. Stasis is basically just like flatlining, the lack of progress. And you're just kind of
you're doing the
you're on a
day-to-day
hamster
job, your
wheel.
factory job, your retail job,
And
your
I
professional
think
job. Okay,
most
yeah.
people, even if they're, I think most people come to a level of acceptance of this is what my life is, this is what it must be, which leads to the stasis, right? And so, although from an
Yeah.
upper bound looking down, you say, how can you possibly be comfortable in this? I think that most people get to some level of just like resignation
And
of
they're
this
around
is
totally
totally.
them, like, um
I think that
so
the
it's kind of like you don't want to be the odd one out by
I think
making more
what
money. Yeah.
I think what the cycle does is, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you have the physiological of, do I have a roof over my head? And then it progresses to, am I eating tonight? To, am I loved? To, what is my unique contribution? I think that that cycle starts at the level of need where you are, and it gets you to up level 1 to 2 needs, right? So like, after
Gotcha.
I sold my
Okay, I
company
see.
and I made 30 million, I no longer had a security need anymore. I still feel it. I still feel anxiety about those things, but that's like, it's almost like old programming that's continuing to run, as opposed to like me coming to this anew. And so it led me to the question of, what is my contribution? And so I think the cycle wants you to get to the next question of what's next. And that tends to be an up leveling in what the need is. So a focus on physiological needs, to then to ultimately contribution needs. And I think we're like, when people sell a company, they've so satisfied their need for security, but they're so used to solving for that problem that they don't ever look to the higher level need of, that the cycle is trying to get you to, which is, what is my
Yeah.
contribution going to be, right? They just are like, okay, what's the next business to start so I can make another zero in my bank account? And I think that the daemon within us
Contribution
knows
meaning like what do you want to help other people with,
how,
or
yeah, what is your,
define contribution?
I think how Maslow defines contribution is like, you know, your needs for security is you still, that's kind of like the last level of you filling your own needs. Once that need is met, the next need for you is to learn how to uniquely fulfill the need in others, how to contribute to the other's need. Like, Aristotle talks about where your deep gladness meets the world's deep needs. And usually when somebody has made enough money, after you just have diminishing returns after you've made a couple $1,000,000, like another couple $100,000 just doesn't fill you the same way. The only way that you can get filled the same way as making your first $100,000 is to contribute to the well-being of someone else's life, to give something, right, that fulfills someone else. And that gives you that same feeling that making your first $100,000 gives you. It gives you that euphoria, the like the giving, like the money quote is, you haven't, if you think money doesn't make you happy, then you haven't made enough to give it all away. And I think that's the contribution aspect that I think a lot of people never get to in their life, because they're so set on, just where their security is going to be. I think the cycle the cycle is an up-leveling of the needs, from physiological to security and safety to love and contribution within those that are in your immediate circle, to then love and contribution within, all of mankind, and your unique contribution to mankind. And I think that's all. I think that's the hero's journey that we're all able to go on if we just comply with it, if we just kind of allow ourselves to surrender to the process a little bit.
Okay, so that makes sense. But I would say that the last part then now, and you touched upon this a little bit, but I think it's like, okay, so a lot of people that even probably would be listening to this podcast, I think are probably at the point where some awakening has happened, some disruption is about to begin. Um, but how do they find like quote unquote their calling? It sounds to me like the daemon almost kind of helps you identify your calling, right? In
Yeah.
kind of non creepy mannerisms of like putting it together. Just for people that haven't heard the term daemon before, then, but so it's like, okay, how do you do that though? Like, okay, why? Like, how is a lawyer making money and finding success in an escape room, right? How does that like? What do you
Yeah.
do as somebody who knows that they can't do what they're doing, but doesn't know what else to do?
I think the how question ultimately has to be answered individually. There isn't the how. The how is the same as what is my unique purpose. It's with grappling with the question that you find the answer. So the giving of the answer puts you on a path that isn't your path, right? And so if you say, how do you do it? And the answer is, okay, well, you should start an escape room business. You're now on a default path that was my path, right? You're trying to copy
Correct.
what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did,
yeah.
right? And what I did was totally
Yeah, which is tough
contextualize.
though because to understand because it's not like you had a passion for escape rooms, right? You didn't even like escape rooms, and yet
Nope,
you made millions of dollars from it. So it's
right.
just like, how does somebody like again? I'm just thinking of myself of like because I've spent a year of my life multiple times looking for what to do. Like just
Yeah.
trying to explore
And I think
and
I
pull
think
a
that
thread.
probably the better question than how do I do it is the better question is, what are the actions that I should take? Because how is a mental game that you're trying to solve something in your head, and you will almost never get this by solving something in your head. It is the discovery process is a process of action, and it's a process of trying new things. And then the question is, what is the feeling that I should try to harness as much as possible when deciding what to do? And the worst feeling to try to harness is one of FOMO or greed or trying to just make money. And the best feeling is one of enthusiasm and fun and all of these emotions that
Curiosity.
we deem childish, right? It's that, right? Especially if you spend any time in school and you spend all this time building up this organ that is your brain. You think that this brain is the best place to solve things, and then when you get to this question of what is my purpose, the problem is the brain can't solve it on its own. It's a full body experience that requires the integration of your brain and your heart and your soul, and or whatever, however much of that you believe. But if you try to solve
Okay.
it
Yeah.
as a mental LSAT word problem, it's just never going to happen for you, because it is an act. It is an act of doing. I thought this in the past 6 months. I thought that maybe I wanted to be a professional pickleball player. I'm very good at pickleball. I'm in the top 10% of pickleball players in the world without spending that much time on it. So I thought
Yeah.
maybe I should be a professional pickleball player as my next thing. And so what I did was I said, I'm going to do 3 pickleball tournaments, and I'm going to treat pickleball like it is my job now. I'm going to drill a couple hours a day. I'm going to clean up my diet. I'm going to exercise more. And so I went for it. I went for it for a month. And what I found was, as I turned the game of pickleball from play to work as my vocation, this is what I'm going to do, it lost all of its joy to me. It didn't bring me any
Yeah.
joy, happiness, fulfillment whatsoever. And so even though I thought that the stars kind of aligned, that like this would be my next thing to do, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I had all these people that said, this is, you're so great at pickleball. This is great. You can make millions of dollars a year just traveling around to sunny areas. There are plenty of reasons on why it should be the thing that I should do, but I had I had no polarity to it. There was nothing in it that called me
But
and
now
pulled me
here's the
and held my
crazy thing.
attention.
He- Here's the tough part I see with that though, right? Is if you hadn't sold your escape room business and you were this good at pickleball and you did need the money and you did find or rationalize that pickleball could be your best source of income, then maybe you would have gone for it. You know what I'm
Totally.
saying?
Yeah, for
So how
sure.
do
I
you
think I
kind of
think
reconcile?
I don't think it's a reconciliation at
Like
all.
it
I
just,
think that
I guess the difference.
it's
Yeah,
a
sorry.
different path. I totally think that if I was in a state, I think that as your need gets met, you up level. When I was playing pickleball, like what I really felt was that I was wasting my time. I felt like I had a deeper and more impactful contribution to give to the world than me being able to hit a great forehand dink for people,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Okay.
so it
Because
felt
I okay, I like that because I feel
it,
I've felt that with certain activities. Yeah.
it feels hollow to me, right? If you and this is I think this is what happens when people right this is why people tend to leave their profession is because they join the profession to meet a need of security that was imposed on them, and they had a fear of security usually imposed by their parents or those who grew up, and they say, I'm not going to be in poverty, I want a stable job because my parents never had a stable job. And so they become
Yeah.
surgeons or lawyers or accountants or whatever. But then once the need of security is met, right, the whole impetus to do the thing has faded to black, right? And so that you feel no impetus to it
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
You feel no draw to it anymore. Versus as someone who grew up in a totally impoverished world, and these are the people that I tend to find that enjoy law firms, is they grew up very, very poor, and they're making so much more money than they ever expected to make. They still have that need of security is
Yeah.
so deeply ingrained in them that they don't feel like it's ever able to be satiated. So as long as that need stays, they still have a draw to the thing that they've signed up to do to meet the need. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 Okay. I appreciate that
Um,
clarification. Yeah.
and then I think that's why. But I totally agree that if I was, and it creates a totally parallel universe, a parallel path. But um, I think that makes it make total sense.
Nice. Nice. So when's it come out, or what's the next step? Or like,
Well,
you feel like you're 25% through, or like halfway through, or because I know it takes a while, right? There's probably you're gonna have revisions and all that, but
yeah, this version of it, this cycle that I just walked you through, that um, has been a maybe in the past 2 or 3 days. I think probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about. I think I'm probably going to delete everything that I have and start over from scratch and kind of bring the audience along
oh
for the
shit.
ride for it. Yeah, I think so. Because I
Why
think,
start from scratch? Is it just like a new thesis essentially, or
I mean, this cycle, before everything that I was trying to do was tied to how to make more money and how to find more fulfillment in the making of money. And, and I think this is, I think it, uh, I think it appeals to more than just that pursuit. And so I want to just explore it a little bit more and kind of see where it all goes. But I think that I think that cycle I think that cycle kind of rings true, at least. But part of what I want to do instead of just working behind the curtain is to you know have the ideas get beat up in public, right? And kind of come up with the best answer for how you go about this process of finding meaning in the work that you do.
nice, nice. I like it. I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it
Hopefully.
too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty crazy that you're open to scrapping the idea, right? Like in my head is always like, okay, how do I repurpose some of it? And I get like the objective of it is like, okay, you want to deliver a certain message, and you don't want it to be like, maybe what do you call it, watered down with other things that are not necessarily on topic. And I feel like it's a lot of like, yeah, you kind of discovering a niche, or not a niche, but an item for yourself while you're kind of doing it. So it's almost like cathartic.
Yeah, I do think it. I do think, and I think it's the journey, right? The journey that I'm talking about is the journey that I'm on, right? And I think I've been through this cycle a couple times now. The first time not having any map for what was happening and just experiencing it, and then now having a little bit more time to kind of pay attention to what's going on. And so yeah, so to the extent that anyone in the audience has any experiences that they felt like were course altering, course adjusting, or they feel like there's a part of their experience that maps on to this cycle or that totally flies in the face of the cycle, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can hit me up on social media, wherever. And because I'm actively looking for stories that prove it, disprove it, and getting to the best answer of how all this happens. So if you like this episode, give us a 5-star review. If you didn't like this episode, the cost of that is giving us a 5-star review. And we will see you on the next one. Peace.